Hello there, and we're back for yet another CCW, ClueCon Weekly. And this week I'm delighted to have with me Luca Pradovera. Did I say that correctly, Luca?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Well, we're off to a flying start. And Luca agreed to come on and talk a little bit about what he does within SignalWire, the company behind FreeSwitch. But before we do that, Luca, well, actually, let's just ask you first of all, what is it? What is your job title within the SignalWire organization first?
I am a solutions architect, and my goal is to get people working on proof of concepts and interacting with the APIs for the first time to get off to a flying start and get working as fast as possible with all the features we offer.
Great stuff, and we will come back and talk about that. But I was very interested about how you got into open source telephony and FreeSwitch in the first place. So I wonder if you could tell us that story first.
Oh yeah, so a few years ago, I was working with a team developing web applications for the government, and one of them was a distributed translation application. So people that spoke languages that were not very well known in Italy will be able to interact with each other. So if you need someone who spoke Chinese, a dialect of Chinese, you could find it via a web API. And that led us into implementing a telephony application, and I got started with both FreeSwitch and Adhesion, which is a Ruby framework for developing web applications, which I worked on then for many years at the same time. So essentially, that's how it started. It was born out of a need. I was doing mostly web development, and I will say a database administrator at the time. Then telephony just clicked. It was something I really liked, and I've been working with that since. But that's how it started, with the need of building a distributed translation application for people to interact with each other.
Right, yeah, I remember Adhesion, and remember that was on top of Asterisk. Was it also on top of FreeSwitch?
Yes, from almost the start, we had a FreeSwitch compatible version. I don't even remember. I might have built the first version of the Adhesion compatible layer for FreeSwitch. We started with Asterisk, but that particular project went to FreeSwitch almost immediately because of a couple of features I needed. For a long time, we've used both in development. Then over the last 3 or 4 years, I think most of the development focused on FreeSwitch, mostly out of standardizing the internal processes.
Right, I'm with you. And have you ever found yourself using FreeSwitch as a standalone technology, or has it always been coupled with Adhesion?
Now, we've used that in FreeSwitch in so many ways. FreeSwitch can be used for anything to an impromptu SBC, to a registration server, media server. We have one case where FreeSwitch was being used almost exclusively for the media transcoding. So SIP media will be hairpin in and out, and all you do is just transcode from one codec to another, because the transcoding is very good in the FreeSwitch core. And we've been doing a variety of interesting applications. Adhesion was almost always the go-to tool for controlling the system, of course, but FreeSwitch was providing most of the lifting. So Adhesion is just, for people who don't know, is an alternative to using Event Socket, for example. It's a control layer.
Yeah, and just in case people wanted to investigate more about Adhesion, where would they go for that?
Well, we have a website, adhesion.org. Version 3 is being lagging behind for a while, but 3RC1, which is on the gem repository right now, it's very stable and very good. And we'll be using that internally at SignalWire to build some testing applications and other internal tools. There's a small but fierce community of maintainers, and it's going out pretty well.
Yes, I remember. In fact, was Evan ever involved in Adhesion, or did I remember that wrong? I know Ben Klang wasn't he?
There was Ben Klang, Ben Langfeld, myself, a few other contributors. Evan was involved in Adhesion for a long time, and they also were using Adhesion internally at Ring Plus. So it's been I will say it's a heavily battle tested framework at this point. We've done a lot of things with it.
Yes, it sounds like it's been used in quite a few different scenarios. And so how did you end up getting reeled in to the SignalWire organization?
So we knew so many people in the industry, and when Tony, Evan, and Sean, which I didn't know at the time, but I have a very good relationship with both Evan and Tony, got started, they eventually started asking everybody in the industry who has a experience that could contribute to the success of SignalWire if they were interested in joining. And since I've been running my own company for a long time, I have consulting experience, I have a customer-facing experience. So working with people to figure out what they need, if we can provide it, and what's missing from the offering, maybe if there's anything missing. It was a natural fit to me to join because it feels to me like the consulting space is very crowded. It's still very interesting. It's lovely to work in there. But on the other side, it's always great to have the ability to work on newer things and bigger projects, which SignalWire certainly is.
Right. So yeah, involved in a multiplicity of different things. And yes, SignalWire is one of those entities that seems to have soaked up quite a few people from the free switch community along the way who were involved in one way or another. And I'm very glad that you're one of them. And now, one thing we haven't covered, Luca, is your Italianness. I believe you're speaking to us live from Italy right now.
Yes, I am actually. It's six. It's half past 6 p.m. here, and it's winter, so it's already very dark.
Right. Oh, good stuff. Now, in SignalWire, as you explained what you were doing. What do you find happens on your day to day? What kind of things are you involved in within SignalWire and out there with customers?
Generally speaking, being on the time zone I'm working in means I get the mornings for testing out code, writing proofs of concepts, and in general, working on the more technical aspect of my job. I'm still very much a full-time engineer, only I'll also end up talking to people. So that's the first half of the day. At past, I will say 2 p.m. I started getting on calls because of the time zones, etc. And we talk to customers on various levels. Some calls are first introductory calls where we figure out either if there is a value proposition we can give to a customer, which is usually the case, in which case what the value proposition is, or if it's a second or third meeting, we work through the various aspects that the customer has been encountering during their own implementation, such as we're trying to place a call from SEP to PSTN, but this has happened, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Or we go over sizing of systems. Many people underestimate the effort that's necessary to maintain a telephony system at this scale, and also on their end. So sometimes people have systems that are not capable of sending, 1,000 messages per second. So we need to figure out how to help them get to that scale quickly, because of course, the more they send, the more the bottom line grows, which is, but generally speaking, also the idea is that the goal for the onboarding team is to get people up and running as quickly as possible, because that allows us to better tailor experiences for every customer. So I generally go through a lot of questions during the call, such as, how much following do you have? What's your typical use case? What's your favorite language? Are you open to trying something new? As in, maybe we can spot something in the workflow of a company that will be interesting and tell them, why don't you try doing this too? Like we were discussing earlier with a company that sent texts, and the texts have links to images. And we said, well, why don't you try using MMS? There are some limitations with the size of files, etc. So if the images are very big, they won't go through, etc. But it's a normal size of image. You could do that. So finding out new opportunities is part of my job too. So come talk to me and we'll figure out something cool to do together.
Right now, I would like to hear your take on the difference between free and SignalWire. Before we get to that, do you find that the people who are coming to ask you these questions are they existing free switch users who have found a use for SignalWire, or are they really coming from a different angle?
There's a smattering of each possibility. I will say they fall in three segments. People who are already using FreeSwitch and they want to keep using FreeSwitch. SignalWire offers a commercial offering based on FreeSwitch that's called Stack, that includes up-to-date versions and support and some kind of systems development, etc., in case you need help with that. And that's one type of customer. Generally speaking, they are long-time FreeSwitch users. They have 40, 50 installations, and they're not looking really to move out of that comfort zone, but instead looking to improve the current offering. So very often we end up pitching cloud to them too. Cloud does a lot of different interesting things we can go through later. As you said, differences between FreeSwitch and SignalWire, there's many of them. But so that's the first case, people that already have a lot of FreeSwitch installs. Then we have another segment that is people who have been exposed to FreeSwitch, and that's how they came to SignalWire. But for some various reasons, they don't really want to run FreeSwitch themselves. So they've tried running a couple boxes. It was interesting to them. They made a couple small services working out well, but then they realized to get from 2 machines to 40, it's a long journey. And that leads them to look into cloud and the advanced features we can offer. Of course, the third and final segment is people who never worked with FreeSwitch, and in many cases don't even have internal telephony or real-time communications experience, which come to SignalWire to solve the problem. So there is not too many of them. I will say the highest number of people have had some exposition to FreeSwitch and have come to SignalWire through FreeSwitch. The people who have large privilege installations know each of us personally at this point. Like those people have met me at multiple conferences. They met Tony, they met Evan, they met everybody. So I would say those calls are hardly introductory calls. Like we just say hello and start talking about business.
Yeah, they're calls between old friends that know the capabilities. And so for those people watching that would ask, what is the difference between FreeSwitch and SignalWire? What would your rough guide to that be?
So SignalWire is a company. FreeSwitch is the open source project, first of all. So just to clarify, the FreeSwitch open source project is very much alive. We just released yet another version. It's being cared for more than ever before because SignalWire sponsors the development and has the resources to keep following on the open source version with a dedicated team. Keep also in mind that the open source version powers the commercial offering, so we need to make sure that's always up to date. So that's part of the thing. So the differences. Let's talk about technical stuff. FreeSwitch is only the main part, the core of a telephony stack that involves speech recognition, text speech, recording and playback and all the kind of things that you might want to do with telephony. While SignalWire Cloud offers all of these in an easy-to-use package with 2 different APIs. One is a WebSocket-based API called Relay, which is quicker responding and more suited to real-time applications. And the other is good old HTTP-based LAML API. And that way, you get many building blocks that otherwise you will have to build yourself, such as just the easiest speech recognition and text-to-speech, both with transcription and menu-based grammar interactions, are not easy to do. And they're easy to do in FreeSwitch too, but you have to manage them yourselves. While all of the features are just available in SignalWire, and you can just use that. As I said before, though, SignalWire does also offer a on-premise version, which is called Stack, which is our commercial supported version of FreeSwitch, which is released more often, as a few key differences, mostly regarding some closed source modules, so they're not part of the core distribution, and is updated more often. And the package includes support from the core team, which is probably the most important part of the package. Like, you do get a more up-to-date version, you get a few commercial modules included, but more important, you get direct access to the people who built FreeSwitch and keep managing it.
Right. Yes, it does strike me that a lot of the advantages are around management, because when people have been using FreeSwitch, if they wanted to put it into some large-scale international elastic infrastructure, that would be a large challenge in and of itself if they were to do it by themselves. And yet we've created that facility.
Absolutely. And moving from 1 machine to 4, anybody can do with a little bit of elbow grease and putting your mind to it. But moving from 4 machine to 40, suddenly you're looking at having to manage so many moving parts that unless you already have a sizable in-house skill for working with FreeSwitch, you need either Stack or just go with cloud. My first go-to, honestly, is tell people, try out the cloud. It's cheap. There's no upfront costs. And all of the prices that we have are very low and very competitive. So at worst case, you learn something and you used up $20. So it's always worth looking at. Then if it doesn't fit, come talk to us and we can help with the stack or FreeSwitch.
Indeed. Yeah, I've been actually playing around myself and learning a little bit of Python to use the Relay API, and had some early success in getting a couple of little things going, which has been quite fun. It's quite nice to go through a learning curve again after all these years. So
Yeah.
you're talking to me. Sorry, Luca, go
ahead.
Yes, what I was going to say was, as you're talking to these people and answering their questions, I realise that some of this will be commercially confidential, and we don't want to breach anybody's confidences. But generically, what kind of applications and what kind of stuff are you finding yourself getting involved in?
So for the most part, given the length we've given to the first part of the life of the company, involving telephony and messaging at the, let's say, the base level, this is traffic itself, most of our current customers and the solutions we're working on are involving large-scale, high-throughput applications, such as sending 1 million messages a day, or making a few thousand phone calls per second. The use cases themselves are generally not very complex, I'll be honest. So most of the users right now are doing call screening or IVR, answering machine detection, IVRs connected to their own APIs, CRM integrations. We've seen a lot of CRM integrations. So place a call through SignalWire, and the call gets automatically transcribed and placed into your CRM. That's something that's been going on. And the other, so it's interesting because that's an interesting question. So most of the spectrum lies in the very simple stuff. So just send out a lot of messages, literally just send a lot of them. But then we have a small subset of people who are doing very complicated and very interesting stuff, such as keeping transcription in line during a call, so you can provide information to the agent that's working with a customer on a call center in real time, or splitting out the audio to separate engines so they can do sentiment analysis. So are the people on this call happy or sad or angry about something? The various engines will tell you. There's a few providers for that. So I'm very interested in those kind of applications because, of course, they're more complex, and it also shows the platform is capable of doing very complicated integrations too. So the bulk of the calls I've made revolve around how do we send 1 million messages in a minute, which involves sitting down, figuring out the scale, how many servers you need, how many accounts we need, etc. But there's a small subset of people doing very complicated things, which are extremely interesting.
Yeah. On sentiment analysis, that generally tends to be going through the audio after the phone call, doesn't it? And looking at emotions and things like that to see whether a customer was happy or sad or whatever. But I wonder, how far away are we from real-time analysis where an agent might look at a dashboard to see whether the customer is ready to buy something, for example?
So right now, I would say we're pretty close using the RTP patch out, which is called TAP feature of Relay. There's one customer who was testing sending this RTP to a sentiment analysis engine, and I think they have just a few seconds of delay, so maybe 10 seconds. Of course, you need more spoken material. So you need a few sentences from the user. Just saying yes or no won't work very well. But after a while, when you're conversing with someone, the engine will start catching on their tones, etc. And it's almost real time at this point. I would say very good results are a bit far away, but I've seen it do usable. So let's put it like this. On a long conversation, it will give you almost real-time results. If it's the typical call center interaction where you're just answering a few questions and the call is maybe 2-3 minutes long at this point, it's gonna start working, but it's not gonna be 100% confident about the sentiment. Call goes past 5 or 6 minutes, then you start getting good results.
Yeah, amazing what big data and fast connections can do for a telephony application, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're also seeing real-time translation come online right now. It's something that's been demoed many times. And me and Evan actually built one of the earliest demos back in 2013 or something, based on FreeSwitch and Addition and various APIs that were available at the time. It was very robotic, but it was working very well. And I remember having a conversation with him, with me speaking Italian and him speaking Spanish. And it was really, really fun. But right now, there's so many tools, and they're all so much better, that I feel like sentiment analysis is quite a bit away, but real-time translation in phone calls is probably possible right now. Like, if there's any real market need for that, it is absolutely possible someone comes to market with that in the very near future, because everything is there right now.
So are you talking about a kind of situation like, for instance, in this video call that we're doing here, I could be speaking one language and you would see it on the screen in another language? Or are you talking about actual audio translation where the receiving party would hear translated audio in their ear?
So we've done both. Real-time transcription and captioning will be easier for the kind of call we're doing right now, so me and you, because it's faster to read than to wait for the voice to be generated and translated. Because generally speaking, in a translated voice scenario, what you have is the call will the audio will lag behind my words, because it has to be actually translated, but it's still quite doable. So it doesn't have the prototype we built at the time will record the entire sentence, ship it off to Google, then ship it off to another service, then generate the TTS, then speak. So you'll be hearing audio only now from when I started speaking.
Right.
But it's possible to do it with a little bit of delay. It feels like to me that a real-time transcription, which is something our founder Tony was working on few weeks ago, actually, so an interesting demo. The real-time transcription will probably be more suited to conferencing style things, because by the time I've stopped speaking, you have already read all of what I've said, right? And you can respond almost in real time, while longer translations will take longer, just for the API speed, etc. That will improve eventually, but it will never be zero, because it has to be somehow managed by the far end.
Yes, indeed. Understood. Okay, well, we're drawing towards the end of our time together, but I wanted to ask you, since you're on the front line and you're on the receiving end from a lot of inquiries, what are your top 1, 2, or 3 questions that come in, the things that you find yourself having to repeatedly tell people or answer to people?
So recently, I will say it was about rate limits. So how many messages can we send per second for one number? And it's related to also people wanting to use normal phone numbers instead of toll-free for messaging. So generally the answer is about 10 messages per second on a toll-free number. So you can make your calculations. Second question I get is generally, how do we connect an existing FreeSwitch system to SignalWire, which is very, very easy, because we provide a module named Mod SignalWire that allows you to provision and connect to the SignalWire cloud, effectively keeping your on-premise FreeSwitch server while using the SignalWire cloud services in a very automated and simple way. And the third most asked question is generally about pricing, and oddly enough, it's about our pricing being too low. Like, since
too good to be true.
Yeah, when we started the company, the idea was we will be an application development company first. Well, not application development, develop an application development toolkit company. So providing services to developers and companies, and not to price gouge people with traffic like many other companies do in the market. And that's why people come to us and say, how can this cost a quarter of what's on other providers? And then we explain why, and they usually understand, because it's a good value proposition, in my opinion. It's actually one of the things that convinced me to join.
Great stuff, great stuff. And very lastly, last week or the week before, I forget which, I was talking to Alan Percy from Telco Bridges about a free FBC product, and also Stir and Shaken, and that kind of battle against the robocallers and the dodgy caller ID. Is Stir and Shaken something that comes up in the conversations you have?
Oh yeah, it comes up a lot. So caller ID is actually, if I may add a fourth question to the most asked ones, is how do I send messages, or how do I make calls with phone numbers I don't own? They're not mine, they're from my customers. So how can I register them, etc.? And stir shaken is certainly going to be important in that area, because it will lift a lot of heavy weight from our shoulders trying to figure out if someone is actually allowed to use a phone number or not. We have a way of verifying phone numbers, but it's generally not, well, people have to do it manually, or we can do it for them. It's not always the most ideal way to go about it. On top of that, many people in the industry, everybody in the industry know, but not many people outside of the industry know that caller IDs can absolutely be completely forged. So it's all up to providers to enforce rules. So we're very strict about that. We don't want any of our customers to be robo-dialers, or people would go do shady stuff. So that's absolutely something we try to avoid. But at the base level of the technology, caller IDs are just strings. So you can write in whatever. It's up to whoever's providing you the line to check that. So stir shaken will be very helpful, well, to us for making our customers' life easier and allowing them to build even more interesting systems and products. For the general public, it will be very important to get the restore a little bit of faith into unsolicited phone calls, right? Because right now it's almost impossible to reach out to someone unless they have your number.
Yeah, those phone calls need all the faith they can get, Luca.
Yeah, so sometimes you get a call from a bank, which is a legit call, like it's your bank, and you don't answer because it's not the usual number. And then it turns out it's just someone calling from the office that's right beside the one they used to call you from. So it's all of the caller ID identification in the industry is going to change a lot, and it's going to help everybody, including the general public.
Yes, and I know that behind the scenes we're doing work on that stuff within FreeSwitch / SignalWire. So, Luca, thank you very, very much for joining me. The last question I generally ask at times like this is there anything else you'd like to say before we clear down?
I don't know. It's been very fun. I've been on ClueCon Weekly once before, and it was wearing a different hat and talking about different things. So it's great to be back. And really, anything people like to try out on SignalWire, we have a very active Slack community channel. So join that and reach out to us and see what you like, and we'll be glad to help put on that in FreeSwitch, the open source side of things, because we still very much love FreeSwitch, and it's where we come from, and it's where we're going to. So it's part of the experience.
And what is the precise name of that Slack channel to jump on, Luca?
SignalWire Community. So SignalWire-community.slack.com.
Okay, and is that the best place for people to find you if they'd like to reach out?
Yes, or they just email me at luca@signalwire.com. I'm always happy to answer emails via the various channels. Like it's actually, it's probably better to email me if they want to reach me directly because of the time zone difference. So I'll be on Slack very often.
Great. Okay. Well, Luca Pradovera, solution architect at SignalWire and FreeSwitch man, thank you very much for being on ClueCon Weekly this week.
Thank you for having me, and see you next time.
All the best.